In the small, secluded village of Bramblewood, nestled deep within a forest, every year on the first day of winter, the villagers gathered for the choosing. It was an event shrouded in mystery and ritual, something that had been practiced for generations. No one dared question it, not even the village elders, who whispered that it was older than the village itself. On this cold, misty morning, the villagers gathered in the town square, bundled in thick coats and scarves, their breaths visible in the frigid air. Children stood close to their parents, clutching their hands, sensing the tension, but not fully understanding why. Everyone's eyes were on the large wooden box that stood on a pedestal at the center of the square. It was old, worn, and covered with strange, faded symbols that no one could decipher. Elder Marlowe, the oldest man in the village, approached the box with the reverence of someone handling a sacred artifact. He held up his hands to quiet the crowd. The village fell silent, save for the soft rustling of the wind through the bare trees. Today, we honor our ancestors and keep our village safe for another year, Elder Marlowe intoned solemnly. Today, we continue the tradition. The villagers nodded in agreement, though some faces showed a flicker of unease. One by one, they formed a line, and each person reached into the box to pull out a small piece of paper, keeping it folded tightly in their hands. The paper was ordinary, just a square torn from an old book, but its contents held the weight of fate. Martha, a young mother, clutched her daughter's hand tightly as they approached the box. She felt a knot tighten in her stomach, a sense of dread that had grown every year since she had been a child. Her husband, Samuel, was a few paces ahead, his jaw set in a grim line. As Martha reached into the box, her fingers brushed against the worn wood, and for a brief moment, she hesitated. She took a deep breath and pulled out a slip of paper, holding it close to her chest. Once everyone had drawn, Elder Marlowe raised his hand again, signaling for the villagers to open their papers. A collective intake of breath swept through the crowd. Martha unfolded her paper slowly, her hands trembling. It was blank. She exhaled in relief, clutching her daughter closer. Around her, murmurs and gasps rippled through the crowd. She turned to find Samuel, whose face had turned pale as he stared down at his slip of paper. It bore a single red mark. Elder Marlowe's voice rang out again. "The chosen has been found," he declared. "Step forward, Samuel." Samuel's hands trembled as he took a step forward, his face a mix of resignation and fear. Martha's heart sank. She felt the weight of every eye in the village upon her, a mix of pity and cold, indifferent acceptance. Her daughter tugged at her coat, confused and scared. "Mama, what does it mean?" the little girl asked. Martha choked back tears, knowing she had to stay strong. It means your father is very brave," she whispered, though her voice shook with every word. Two strong men from the village, Abel and Thomas, stepped forward and took Samuel by the arms. He didn't resist. He had been prepared for this moment his entire life, as everyone in the village had been. They led him toward the old stone path that wound its way up to the top of a nearby hill where the ancient oak tree stood. No one knew exactly what happened up there, only that it was necessary. The village depended on it. No one ever saw the chosen again. As Samuel disappeared over the hill, Martha's knees felt weak. The villagers began to disperse, their solemn faces already returning to normal as they discussed the upcoming winter preparations and the hardships they would face without Samuel's strong arms to help. For them, it was just another year, another choosing. Life went on. But as Martha stared up at the hill, a thought crept into her mind, a thought she had never allowed herself to consider before. What if the tradition wasn't necessary at all? What if it was all for nothing? She shook her head, trying to clear the dangerous thought. But deep down, she knew something had changed. The tradition would continue, but now doubt had taken root in her heart, and she could never look at that old wooden box the same way again. And so, the village carried on, year after year, with the tradition, a ritual they did not understand, but one they were too afraid to abandon. But in Martha's heart, a seed of rebellion had been planted, and seeds, given time, have a way of growing into something far more powerful than any tradition.